to just summarize what we have taught about the basic Keynesian model in chapter 8, I decided to make this video to briefly say that what has happened. So this is a private sector only when there are only producers and the consumers in the model, and the flows of circular flow is been shown in this diagram as we had explained it before. And so the Keynes was saying that let's find the interrelationship between variables, and we can basically classify the variables into endogenous variables such as y and aggregate expenditure, which the aggregate expenditure is dependent variable, and aggregate output is independent variable. So if the y change, then this is actually planned aggregate expenditure based on the way that people think that if their income change, how much they are going to consume and how much they are going to, or firms, how much they are going to invest. So buying final goods and services for the sake of production or for the sake of consumption. Okay, so that's the model. And exogenous variables are the ones which we are assuming that are ceteris paribus. So ceteris paribus it means that they are given, they are constant. In our analysis at the moment of the discussion, they're not going to change, but maybe in the later they're going to change. So we have everything else remains the same. What if they change? What if this I0 autonomous A0 is the autonomous consumption here, and I0 is the autonomous investment here, which may change, but if you have a ceteris paribus analysis, you only consider the changes of a y and e. So if the y is increasing, then we are moving alongside the aggregate expenditure, moving alongside this from point A to point B. And if the income is decreasing, we are moving from point A to point C. But we are suggesting that this gap here is CC prime and BB prime are the self-stabilizers. This is how much they are planned to spending, and this is representing the magnitude of this segment is their income. So if their income falls shorter than the amount which the entire economy is planning to spend, there is a tendency for the Y to go to increase, because this amount is considered unplanned changes in the inventories. So Y minus aggregate expenditure, planned aggregate expenditure, is representing unplanned inventories. Change. It means that they haven't considered this is the amount which people are planning to buy more, but the producers has produced less. So this sends the signals to the producers that why are you producing short? You can increase your output because people are buying it very well. So then there is a tendency for increase, and as this is increasing, we are moving back towards the point A. And quite contrary, if the y is, so we have in this situation, y minus is negative. It means that unplanned inventories is dropping. And if it is positive, it means that producers produce this amount, the entire B prime, whereas the people are spending no more than the B, this area. So this becomes produced and it's going to be stored in the inventory, but they haven't planned for it because the planned inventory is already inside the planned aggregate expenditure. Therefore, there is a tendency for the Y to decrease, and then we move from B to point A. That was the analysis made, and the equilibrium will emerge systematically by solving the aggregate expenditure and the 45-degree line, which is representing Y is equal aggregate expenditure. So the intersection is there is going to be a level of income which the actual investment and the planned investment are matching. Therefore, we will have our equilibrium like this, determining the aggregate output is going to be determined by solving that equilibrium condition. Equilibrium condition is that Y minus AE is equal 0. It means that there is no unplanned inventory. Everything is actual. Actual and planned are going to be match. Or we said it that Y equal aggregate expenditure. This is basically like this. And the negative one was when Y is smaller than aggregate expenditure, and the positive one was Y is bigger than aggregate expenditure. So these are disequilibrium. Okay, so these are short-lived. They're not going to live long, because within the process, the firms and households interact, and they would know that when they should increase their output, when they should decrease their income, and then they have their income. But if the exogenous, now let's say that like in demand function, we were saying that satisfaction change or the price of other commodity changes. So if the exogenous variables change, what is going to happen? What the thing is going to happen is that the entire plan aggregate expenditure is going to be shifting. So if either I0 or A0 is increasing, then we are going to have a shift upward in the aggregate expenditure or planned aggregate expenditure. So if the A0 or I0 increase, then we are moving from equilibrium point A to equilibrium point B prime. Or quite contrary, if they decrease, A0 or I0 decrease, then we are going to have A2. So something interesting happened. Remember that we were trying to explain that why the GDP is fluctuating. So if the exogenous variable change, it is possible that instead of having a stable GDP around A, any change is going to bring back us to here again, if everything else remains the same. But if those everything else, this is showing the confidence of the consumers, this is showing the confidence of the investors. If the firms thinks that things are going to be good, they're going to borrow more money and buy more machines and equipments, and they try to increase their GDP, the output. And the consumers also the same. If they think that their income is going to improve, they basically the autonomous consumption starts increasing, and that is a shift. So during the optimism, shifts upward happens, then we are going to have an equilibrium income, bigger equilibrium income. During the pessimism, bad time, crisis, this may shift permanently to a lower equilibrium level of GDP. So Keynes was able to explain that over time, as exogenous variables such as A0 or I0 change, the GDP will not go smooth. The long run growth was a smooth growth like this from time 0 to time t. This was in chapter 5, we explained the potential level of GDP. So this is potential GDP, or we can show it with Y star or Y0, depending different textbooks, or YF, full employment. But because of the changes in the exogenous variables, we are basically bouncing up and down out of, so the business cycles was able to be explained. These are all equilibrium GDP, but in equilibrium which is departing from what potentially can be produced. Imagine that this is exactly equal to the potential level of GDP. So this is what potentially economy can produce. But if consumers and the producers get excited, they may actually overproduce at higher level, like this point here, bigger than what potentially they can produce. Or during the recessionary time, they may produce here. Goods and services economy is in equilibrium, so Y is going to be equal aggregate expenditure, but the new equilibrium is far less than what economy could potentially produce. So this is representing a point like this. So we are producing less than what economy can produce. So this was an explanation that because consumption and investment are sensitive to the value of the exogenous variables, it is possible that the equilibrium in goods market may not be necessarily what ideally is suitable for the economy or the potential GDP. Okay, so in this way, it was well explained. It was one explanation for the economy. So what is coming next? The coming next in chapter 9, we are going to add the government sector. Government sector. And by government sector, the government has the government spending and government tax. So these are fiscal tools. So the government budget is how much they gain the tax minus the government spending. Okay, so this is the budget. And by saying that, basically now the Keynes is coming with some solution that private sector may be causing the expansion. This is called expansion, and this is called contraction. This is called recession, and this is called boom. So boom and the expansion and contraction can be corrected by the actions of the government, because these variables is in the hand of the government spending and tax. So if the private sector gets excited, become too much optimistic or too much pessimistic, the government can work it out and make it smoother. So instead of going like that, that is what we wanted to explain in the next chapter, in chapter 9. So stay with me, and this is called stabilization policy. So number 1, Keynes explain why the business cycles happens, and he also provided a solution like a stabilization policy that we are going to exactly explain it in chapter 9. Thank you.